Coming up on In the Life.
Catholicism and homosexuality. When their paths cross, it's don't ask, don't tell. A discussion on leadership. Is there a vision for the gay community? Also, theater, comics, music, and an interview with presidential advisor George Stephanopoulos. All up next on In the Life. In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by James C. Hormel, Jeffrey B. Soref, and In the Life's National Membership Network.
In the
Don't ask, don't tell. That phrase is not usually associated with this symbol or this one. But where homosexuality and religion intersect, don't ask, don't tell may be a new catchphrase framing an age-old controversy. Hello, I'm Katherine Linton. Welcome to In the Life and the University of Notre Dame. Fall in any university or college setting stirs up images of hitting the books, campus parties, dates, and football. That's especially true here at the University of Notre Dame in northern Indiana. But what happens when a group of gay and lesbian students try to find and foster their community on a campus whose roots are essentially conservative and whose mission is based on the moral teachings of the Roman Catholic Church?
In January of 1995, John Blanford and I were called into a meeting with Father Peter Rocca, who was the assistant to the Vice President of Student Affairs, and we were informed that because the group had advertised the location of a meeting that we had held the previous fall, we would no longer be allowed to use the room in the counseling center that we had been using for the past 9 years to hold our meetings. We were essentially kicked off campus.
GLND SMC, or Gays and Lesbians of Notre Dame and St. Mary's College, its sister school, was several times denied official recognition which would entitle them to an on-campus meeting space. In a statement issued to the media at the time, Father Peter Rocca said, "Recognition of this group would in some way give appearance that the school approves or sanctions this particular lifestyle."
We really, I think, trying to do our best to actually demonstrate that we are full citizens of Notre Dame. The irony is that by doing that, apparently we pushed people's buttons enough up in the administration building that they felt the need to try to expel us from campus.
On the basis of what was in that petition, their feeling was that it was not something that the university could officially recognize, based upon the feeling that it was not sufficiently consonant with church teaching.
It was not as if they were in rebellion against the university, so much as wanting to be included in what's commonly called here the Notre Dame family. What does it say about the Notre Dame family that some people are not fully included in that image of family?
The reaction of a lot of groups on campus was very supportive. One group, Pax Christi, held a rally for us in front of the building and almost got themselves kicked off campus.
It was kind of nice to see that we did have the student support and we did have even the macho football players, supporting us.
I have to admit I was a little surprised that the Notre Dame community responded as well as they did at first, just because I think a few years ago this sort of support would not have taken place.
I think that the Faculty Senate and other organizations, we're not the only ones who supported the students. I think that they receive support partly because society is changing its image of gay and lesbian students, partly because of the changes in society which affect people here at the university.
The reaction to the group is motivated primarily or immediately by the issue of public relations. That is, what would it seem to the alumni and to major donors if Notre Dame approved such a group? Wouldn't this seem to be forfeiting the Catholic character of the university?
Some alumni would not be bothered at all. Gala, Gay and Lesbian Alumni of Notre Dame and St. Mary's, is a group of over 500, which includes graduates from as far back as the 1950s. Fran Feely is one of its members.
I think it's accurate to say that the administration fears that if they in fact recognize the gay and lesbian group, that they will isolate some of their supporters and some of their alumni. On the other hand, I think it's becoming more and more evident that as the treatment of the gay and lesbian students is coming to light, just as many alumni and supporters have expressed anger and dissatisfaction.
In terms of support for the group, I mean, my own support for the group, just how could I do otherwise? I mean, I'm gay, I'm a faculty member at Notre Dame, I'm a Catholic. My whole life is bound up with issues of trying to figure out how to be Catholic and be gay. There are lesbian and gay and bisexual students who come here, and many of them only begin to come out, only go through that very delicate, fragile process of self-discovery here. And someone's got to be here to meet them and to help them.
We've been here forever. I mean, I think the fact that we're sitting in the Tom Dooley room is really significant. And it's only because you're here that we're able to use this room.
When you think of Tom Dooley, who was a Notre Dame alumnus, and the contributions that he made, and it was possible to look at him and see him as a whole person, and not to so minimize his person because of his homosexuality.
Dr. Tom Dooley is one of Notre Dame's most revered alumni. A highly decorated naval officer, he cared for hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese refugees in Southeast Asia during the 1950s. In 1961, he died of cancer at the age of 34. Notre Dame President Reverend Edward Malloy writes that Tom Dooley is an inspiring model of loving service. He is truly a son of Notre Dame. This statue of Tom Dooley stands near the grotto, a place where students, faculty, and visitors come to reflect on the spirit of the university.
Tom Dooley's held up as the prime example of what a Notre Dame alumnus, a Notre Dame graduate should be, which is somebody committed to service, who incorporates these values in his very person, and what they keep forgetting is that he was a gay man who was persecuted in the military because of that. And that's part of the Notre Dame history, and it's a part of the history we want to reclaim. We're part of here.
What difference has becoming a member of this organization made on your life here on campus?
There's no way I would have come out if this group wasn't here.
I think a lot of people would still be in the closet if there was not a gay and lesbian group at Notre Dame.
I think that's a very important thing here, is that once you receive some help through GLND SMC, you really want to help everyone else that's coming to terms with it.
What always persuades me to stay, what keeps me here at Notre Dame, is just the sense that there are people here who need to be told, yes, it's okay to be gay, it's okay to be lesbian, you can be that and you can be Catholic, and no one can take that away from you, least of all the people in the administration here.
Notre Dame is not the only Catholic university where the question of homosexuality is echoing through the halls. Students, alumni, and faculty are posing the question to many Catholic school administrations.
Cardinal Stritch is operated by the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi, and so we very much talk about and try to live out the Franciscan values of hospitality, of respect and dignity for other people, of peacemaking.
Dr. Linda Plagman is Associate Dean of Arts and Sciences at Cardinal Stritch, a small Catholic college outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I came out very publicly in October of '93. I promptly walked into my immediate supervisor's office, the vice president, and informed her. And she sat there and said, "Oh, all right." And then I walked down the hall and talked to the president and let her know. Both of them were very, very supportive. And so I gave a presentation to the faculty and staff and administration of the college one evening about what it's like being a lesbian in a homophobic world.
At Cardinal Stritch College, Dr. Plagman finds herself the only out gay faculty member. The number at Notre Dame, with a faculty 10 times the size, is not much higher.
In a faculty of about 850 people, there are exactly 3 out faculty members. I'm one of them, and the other two are both men. There are no out women on the faculty, even though I know probably 25 lesbians in the faculty and staff, including full professors, who have absolute job security. But the fear is so great of what the reaction might be from one's colleagues that none of those women feels comfortable in coming out.
And so we do have a long way to go in educating. And I think when we're looking at different Catholic colleges and institutions, there's a long tradition of the support for discrimination against or lack of openness and acceptance of gay, lesbian individuals.
Notre Dame and St. Mary's are both schools that place a big emphasis on community, but as lesbians and gays and bisexuals, we've often in the past felt like we weren't fully part of that.
Catholic means universal. G.K. Chesterton said, when they asked what was Catholic, he said, here comes everybody. Well, if we're saying here comes everybody, then we've got to be inclusive. We should not be a community that says some people are outside, some people are not to be included.
No matter what anyone says that being gay is immoral, you know that that's not true because of the sense you get from yourself, and that's not something you can like read about or someone can tell you about. You have to experience it. It's like pure truth coming from within yourself.
Dr. Linda Plagman's acceptance at Cardinal Stritch College and the near unanimous campus support of the gay and lesbian students of Notre Dame seems to signal a broadening of ideas among Catholics. Ultimately, though, it's church doctrine which will determine the complete acceptance of gays and lesbians into the Catholic community. We continued our conversation with Professor Mark Jordan and asked him what is at the heart of the conflict between being gay and being Catholic.
So the church's present position is you can be homosexual, but if you're going to be homosexual, you have to be celibate. Or to say this differently, the church presumes that anyone who is homosexual also has a vocation to celibacy. I think the issue of sexuality makes the Catholic institution uncomfortable, any kind of sexuality. Homosexuality doesn't make them uncomfortable, it terrifies them, because homosexuality has been a persistent feature within the Catholic priesthood and within Catholic religious orders for 1,500 years.
God wants me to be a priest. I don't think it, I don't just believe it. I know it.
When Miramax released the gay-themed film Priest last year, New York's Archbishop John O'Connor called it as viciously anti-Catholic as anything that has ever rotted on the silver screen. And in Washington, Elizabeth Dole voiced her protest by dumping her stock in the Walt Disney Company, parent of Miramax. In the end, there was much visible protest to a film about issues the church would rather keep invisible.
So whenever you raise the issue of homosexuality, you're raising the issue of the big secret of the Catholic Church, especially of the power structures that run the church.
Those who would claim that homosexuality is a major influence in the church, I would be a little cautious about that claim in terms of historical research. I think
Father Robert Nugent is the co-founder of New Ways Ministry, an organization working for justice and reconciliation between gay and lesbian Catholics and the church. Nugent's new book, Voices of Hope, is a collection of positive Catholic writings on gay and lesbian issues.
I don't think anybody would deny there has been a homosocial or homosexual component to the church throughout history. I don't think any would. How much it has contributed, how much it is integral to the life and constitution of the church, I think, is another question which probably only historical research really can answer.
And recent research is beginning to offer some answers. Revolutionary studies by the late John Boswell highlight the intersection between church history and gay history and have set the pace in this new area of scholarship. Professor Jordan's own recent studies, soon to be published by Doubleday, have led him to this conclusion.
Don't ask, don't tell has been the main Catholic policy for 15 centuries. One might say, in fact, that this labyrinth of closets that is the Catholic Church was founded 1,500 years ago in the West just on don't ask, don't tell, carried to the nth degree with a sophistication that the American military can hardly imagine.
Where you have a male-dominated institution, and indeed males who are called to celibacy, there is a certain opening then to certainly a homosocial environment, which is not to say it's homosexual, but a homosocial environment would be very comfortable for those people who identify themselves as gay.
It's a perfect closet. You don't want to have to face the question of getting married and raising children. You become a priest. And that gives you an ironclad excuse for never having to answer the question, when are you going to get married?
I think the higher you go in the structure, in the hierarchy, the more tense, the more difficult it becomes to face this issue openly and honestly. But I think eventually we're going to face it.
Whenever you're talking about the Catholic Church, you're talking about a body that is ruled by a group of men where at least half of them, by the most conservative estimates, are gay and fiercely closeted. So that whenever the issue of, especially of male homosexuality, is raised in a Catholic setting, you have to realize that you're touching on the essential power structures of the Church. That is, on the essential way we construct and defend priestly power within the Church.
The Church is very concerned about its leaders being publicly identified as gay, and so I think the Church is somewhat caught in some tension.
So that the homophobic rhetoric of the Church becomes more and more shrill, more and more vehement, the closer it edges towards the necessity of confessing its own homosexual roots.
The pink triangle is recognized throughout the world as a symbol of lesbian and gay liberation, displayed with pride on t-shirts, tattoos, posters, pins, bumper stickers, you name it. But the triangle didn't always proclaim our pride. Just over 50 years ago, it could be found in only one place, on a strip of cloth next to a number, identifying a prisoner as homosexual in the Nazi concentration camps of World War II. The history of the pink triangle is explored here in Washington at the Holocaust Museum, the world's largest testimonial to the millions of lives destroyed by bigotry and hatred. In the 1920s and 30s, the gay movement in Germany was the world's most advanced. Led by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, gay and lesbian culture in metropolitan areas like Berlin included bars, publishing houses, and gay journals. But in 1933, all this changed when Adolf Hitler became the German chancellor.
In the early days of the Nazi regime, that gay bars were closed, gay publisher houses and journals were forbidden, and it became very dangerous for gay men.
We asked Klaus Müller why gay men were viewed as such a danger to the Third Reich.
Basically, you have to do with a highly gender-biased society in which one of the major goals is to produce a strong Aryan race. Homosexual men were seen as uncertain candidates and as a threat to this major Nazi goal. Lesbian women were not targeted to the same degree. It's not logical, but lesbian women were seen as still future breeders of the Aryan race. They could give birth to children, and it didn't matter how they would feel about that.
While the Nazis were in power, approximately 100,000 gay men were arrested, and about half of them were sentenced to prison. 10 to 15,000 were sent to concentration camps, where they were marked with a pink triangle.
The death percentage of gay men in concentration camps were relatively high if you compare to other smaller groups that were incarcerated, like political prisoners or Jehovah's Witnesses. Then the death percentage of homosexuals was higher, it was 60%.
David Mixner is one of the founding members of the Holocaust Museum's Gay and Lesbian campaign.
I visited the museum and I was very moved and was able to have lunch the next day with the director of the museum. That led to the project of them being the first museum in the world to officially include the gay and lesbian community as part of the museum, to study our history, to set up a center for scholarship for the study of what happened to homosexuals in the Holocaust. It's a historical breakthrough. No other museum in the world has ever done this.
We were very moved that they were going to do this project, whether we raised a nickel for it or not. They were dedicated to fighting homophobia along with anti-Semitism and racism.
More school children, more people, more visitors to Washington, D.C. go through this museum than any other museum. I think it's important that these people do see the histories of gay men who were incarcerated along with the other victims of the Holocaust.
One of these gay men is Stefan K.
I was arrested only for this reason, that I loved a man.
Stefan K. was only 17 years old when he began a relationship with an Austrian soldier. For this, he was imprisoned for 5 years.
They wanted to know whether I had more soldiers, not only one. But I was very, very ashamed, young. I didn't knew even the meaning of this word homosexual, because our love was love, only love. The treatment was not good. It was not good thing. They was not tolerant. They treated us, homosexual, as something wrong.
But many gay prisoners were subjected to even worse horrors. Some were victims of hormonal experiments. Others, like Friedrich Paul von Grossheim, a local merchant from Lübeck, Germany, was arrested, tortured, and forcibly castrated by the Nazi state. For many gays and lesbians today, the Nazi persecution of homosexuals holds an added resonance.
You know, I've lost over 250 friends to AIDS and my partner of 12 years. And I've gone to great lengths personally to remember their faces and their names. And I was over in Amsterdam and I met 2 survivors of the Holocaust who not only was able to get out of the camps when the Allies liberated them, but were rearrested by the Allies and put back in prison because they had deemed that the Nazis had justifiably arrested the gays and lesbians. And it was one of the most horrifying stories I've ever heard in my life.
We have to know what exactly happened, how worse it has been, and otherwise we can't learn if we can prevent it. At this moment there's a strong discussion going on about the radical right in the States using propaganda that resembles National Socialist propaganda. So we have to find out if this is true, where are the similarities, where are the differences, to analyze in which situation we are living. And we can't do that if we only live in the present.
Sometimes then even when I wake, when I remember this bad time and so many, I smile, everything okay, but the memories, they are too bad, they are too sad, you will never forget it so quick.
The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum is a place of remembrance, a place of loss. And it's in such places that sometimes art captures what words cannot. Today, there's a group of men in California who are making their own kind of art as they face their own losses. This group is called the Los Angeles Gay Men's Chorus. Correspondent Tanya Barfield reports.
The Gay Men's Chorus is a group of over 150 singers from in and around the Los Angeles area, a number that's markedly shrinking in the past few years due to AIDS. Despite the losses, however, the chorus recently completed a tour of Eastern Europe, which included a concert and flag ceremony in Prague and a visit to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where gay men were imprisoned and killed during World War II. First-time filmmaker Miriam Bier chronicles this journey and the way songs can serve as a bridge between people, places, and very different histories.
It's not an inside gay film, it's a straight woman's look at this community and what these men have built. Sachsenhausen concentration camp was in Eastern Germany. The Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles, along with a small gay men's chorus from Berlin, as far as we know, were the first openly gay group that were permitted to memorialize this experience.
I would also like to express the hope that in our thoughts here, in our prayers here together, and in our work that we are doing on this tour, that we may in some way make it easier for our brothers to live the lives that they have as gay people, whether they're in the East or the West or wherever we find them.
The chorus has lost more than 90 members now over the last decade. And many of the men on this tour were sick and really saw this experience as maybe their last opportunity to make a difference. This was not just the guys on a field trip. This was enormously important, and I think that came across in their singing and their music, the way they reached audiences. My admiration only grew for these men because of what they've built as a family and as a support system for one another in incredible adversity.
Still ahead on this edition of In the Life, an interview with presidential advisor George Stephanopoulos and the state of lesbian theater on and off Broadway. Also, a look at the comic strip art of Jennifer Camper and Howard Cruse, creator of Wendell. But first, leadership is a contentious issue in the lesbian and gay community, and it raises many tough questions, like who are the leaders, whom do they represent, and to whom are they accountable? Recently, The Advocate, a national gay magazine, asked in a reader poll, who do you think should lead the gay and lesbian movement? Providing what many felt were some arbitrary choices, including none of the above. The poll received mixed reactions, particularly from some of the candidates.
I was surprised that The Advocate presented that poll as part of the original article. I thought, gee, they haven't read my chapter on leadership.
I don't think anyone at The Advocate thought it was a serious poll.
I voted for none of the above.
I was really actually hoping for Miss Congeniality. You know?
Although the actual poll was not taken too seriously, the problems facing leadership were. And in terms of the question, who should be the one leader of the gay community, the answer from the leaders we spoke to was unanimous. No one.
We need to actually move away from enshrining one person as the as the leader for the entire movement, and look much more locally at the many leaders we have, and look also at cultivating and developing and training new leadership.
AIDS has taught us a very valuable lesson. It taught us that leadership can come and it can go very quickly. And so when we place all of our hopes in one leader, we are actually abdicating responsibility ourselves.
I think we have made a colossal error historically thinking that gay and lesbian issues are left issues, that they are only liberal issues. Gay and lesbian Americans live along the political continuum.
If your question is, would I be a good leader of the entire gay and lesbian movement? Probably not. No, I think and at the same time, more left leaders would not be good leaders of the log cabin group.
And we may never agree on one vision, and I don't think we will. I mean, certainly you look at the gay Republicans, and they very much believe in the vision of America that Newt Gingrich offers this country. And, you know, that's not a vision I agree with.
While it's clear that there is a need for multiple leaderships, there still exists an underlying problem. Most gays and lesbians can't identify even the current crop of leaders, much less their organizations.
Some of the frustration that I see around leadership, particularly since I've left the Beltway, I'm more attuned to it, is the sense that there's a real clubby kind of leadership, and it doesn't really interested in hearing what the ordinary person has to say, and it isn't really interested in you if you don't have money.
We have, I think, fairly isolated national organizations, and we have a grand plethora of thousands, literally thousands of lesbian gay rights organizations jumping up all over the country, and we have no effective coordination among them.
What I see is a tremendous distrust among grassroots activists of the Washington-based movement. Most of our organizations don't have chapters, they don't have annual conventions, they don't have a way for members to participate.
But the challenges lie not only with the leaders themselves, but also with the task they face, unifying a diverse and often fragmented community.
In our movement and in the progressive movement in general, I think that we have organized around identity, racial identity, and even the gay and lesbian movement is itself an identity-based movement.
We are trying to unite constituencies that have, on the surface, little connection between them. A labor movement, a women's movement, a lesbian gay rights movement, a people of color movements, which have real long-standing and deep divisions between them, and it is very difficult to overcome them.
Maybe we need to form a Gay and Lesbian Agenda 2000, which is about dealing with homophobia, racism, and sexism, and makes no bones about it.
But I think we must make coalitions with other groups, that we bring the gift that we have learned from our oppression to the society as a whole.
Finally, in a move that might be perceived as ironic, gay and lesbian leaders now say they must go back to their roots, the grassroots organizing that has been so effective for the radical right.
I'm confused about the Christian rights model. On the one hand, I think that their training of activists has been very effective, and I'd love to replicate that. On the other hand, the right wing doesn't believe in critical thinking. They systematically attack the idea of questioning and pluralism and dissent.
There's one thing that we all must do, regardless of anything else. We have got to build a field operation in the country, and we've never done it. We've had a lot of smoke and mirrors. We have had the illusion of a field. We've had an illusion of a kind of piece of machinery that can honor constituency power. There is no there, and we should stop pretending there is.
The radical right has been very effective in packaging our goals as special rights, and I feel like we have not been equally effective in packaging our goals as what we do want.
Our goal for the next 5 years really is an education campaign. We're engaging in our party. Obviously, the rise of the far right is most prevalent in our party, and I think that as we succeed or fail, we'll have a large measure on an effect on the rest of the gay and lesbian communities.
I believe we need words and symbols that are as deeply rooted and resonant in the American psyche as anything the radical right can come up with.
I do think we have a vision of a gay and lesbian agenda, and I think that's where we can come together, progressive and conservative alike, around our vision for gay people. But the larger vision thing, to quote my favorite guy, George Bush, the larger vision question of, what are we for? What do we want? In a broad way, I don't think that gay people have begun to answer that.
As the search for leadership and vision within the gay and lesbian communities intensifies, some are also looking outside the ranks to straight leaders and friends who administer and control public policy. Some are looking to the top.
On October 20th, the very day President Clinton lent support to the Employment Non-discrimination Act, or ENDA, George Stephanopoulos, senior advisor to the president, was scheduled to address a large group of lesbian and gay journalists. Needless to say, he broke the news.
President Clinton has announced his explicit support of legislation to protect all Americans from discrimination in the workplace. Frankly, most Americans don't realize that in 41 states, gay and non-gay citizens alike can be fired from their jobs, demoted, or denied a promotion simply because their boss dislikes their sexual orientation. Most Americans think that's already against the law, but it's not, and it should be.
The audience, while appreciative of the visit, was skeptical.
The bottom line question is, why should gay and lesbian voters believe President Clinton this time around, this election? How solid is his support for this bill?
Stephanopoulos acknowledged their hesitation.
Even as I say these words and I look out across this audience, and these are words that I believe very, very deeply, and as I said, I've been there from the very beginning. But I also know that many of you are sitting out there and saying, give me a break. They took our money, they took our votes, and they walked away. After the battle over the ban, politicians and journalists, probably some of you, stated that President Clinton had learned that gay issues are the third rail in politics. Touch it and you die.
Congressman Barney Frank, who introduced Stephanopoulos to the gay press that day, insists that, controversial or not, high-level government discourse of gay issues is unprecedented.
Bill Clinton's role with regard to prejudice against gay men and lesbians is exactly as John Kennedy's was with blacks. It is the first historically. It is not to the liking of those of us who want it to be the #1 priority. It isn't always successful, but it is of historic proportions.
In the Life spoke to George Stephanopoulos about the political season ahead. We began with the Employment Non-discrimination Act.
The President has long supported the need to fight discrimination in all areas of life, but especially in the workplace. He said, you know, if you expect people to work and you want people to work, how can you deny them the opportunity to work? And it's just a very simple premise that you shouldn't be denied a job because of who you are. It should be about your skills and your qualifications. And I perfectly expect that there are going to be an awful lot of people out in the country, extremists, who want to defeat the president, who don't care about gay and lesbian rights, who will try and make a lot of political hay out of this, who will really try and conjure up some kind of scare tactics or frighten people away from working for what they already know is right.
If the president feels like issues like school curriculum and the right to gay marriage should be kept on the state level, and at the same time people on a day-to-day basis are being oppressed based on those issues, at what point should the federal government step in?
The president does not believe that the state should get involved in the issue of gay marriage. He's simply against it. I know that many people wish he would, but that's not his position, that's not his belief. He will continue to fight for what he believes in and not get involved in fights where he doesn't agree. That's just what you have to do as president. You can't be behind every battle, but he has been behind the issue to fight against discrimination in the workplace. He's fought for fairness to gays and lesbians in the military, even though we haven't got what we wanted. He's led the fight against AIDS in this country on the issues of education and prevention and treatment. He's used his Justice Department to fight discrimination against people with AIDS, particularly with the Americans with Disability Act, and he's fought these Republican proposals on Medicare and Medicaid, which are a direct threat to the gay and lesbian community, especially those with AIDS. So he's stood up on issues of concern for gays and lesbians. That doesn't mean he's been 100% on the agenda, and you can't be 100% with the agenda of every community in the country, but you can work for broad principles. You can work with the values that you believe in, the rest of the country believes in, and that's what the president's going to continue to do.
Many Americans realize for the first time that lesbian and gay Americans are not what we'd been told. The stereotypes spread by bigots and bashers no longer resonate. We've discovered what we really already knew but often fail to admit, that you are our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, and our relatives. We've discovered that you're entitled to the same rights and respect as everyone else. We've discovered the truth.
Popeye, Annie, Snoopy, Blondie, and Nancy. These are some of the characters that shaped our childhoods and fueled our imaginations. But correspondent Alan Tulin reports on a different cast of characters you haven't yet seen in your Sunday funnies.
Comic strips are a part of the fabric of American life, and this year the U.S. Post Office is honoring 20 of our most beloved comics with a set of commemorative stamps. None of them, as far as we know, is written by or portrays an openly gay character, though the jury is still out about Brenda Starr's best girlfriend, Hank. While a gay cartoonist may not get a postage stamp this year, there's still a strong and increasingly visible tradition of gay artists creating gay comics. One of these artists is Jennifer Camper, who started drawing for the Boston newspaper Gay Community News in the early 1980s.
I think open gay cartooning started as a result of the underground comics in the 60s. And the underground comics broke a lot of barriers and started stretching what could and could not be done in comics. What's interesting about all the different gay cartoonists is that everybody does something extremely different. and there's room for everybody right now, but you're not going to get rich. I always say that I became a cartoonist because all the equipment you need is small and real easy to shoplift.
So, what is the lure of cartooning? Why pursue an art that has so few financial rewards?
Cartoons are very accessible. You can say a lot in a cartoon that you couldn't necessarily say in another medium because cartooning is friendly, it's real, it's like candy. People come to it very open, very vulnerable, so you can really smack them upside the head with something very powerful. Humor is a very powerful weapon, and laughing at your enemies or laughing at the oppressor is the easiest way to take away their power.
Howard Cruse is an artist who spent his lifetime using humor as a weapon, and in the process has influenced nearly every gay cartoonist working today. His graphic novel, Stuck Rubber Baby, has just been published by Paradox Press, and by adapting his touring slide presentation, Howard gave us at In the Life a peek into his past and present.
I was born and raised in Alabama. Dad was a preacher, and I grew up listening to sermons every Sunday. By the time I was 8, I discovered my calling in life, which is to grow up and draw a nationally syndicated newspaper comic strip. After all, America loved the funnies, so if I could get my comic strip onto the funny pages, then America would love me. My whole perspective on cartooning changed when I got turned on to underground comics. In 1979, my underground comics publisher invited me to launch a new series of underground comic books to be called Gay Comics. Then in 1983, Wendell came into my life. He fell in love with Ollie Chalmers, and their relationship quickly became the core of the strip. The last Wendell episode ran in 1989. That's because of all the time and energy it's taken to write and draw the more than 200 pages of Stuck Rubber Baby. Stuck Rubber Baby is about a guy named Tolan Polk who lives in a southern town called Clayfield, just when all the racial strife is boiling to the surface. Tolan watches resistance played out on a small scale and on the kind of scale that makes history. A lot of aspects of Tolan's hometown Clayfield come pretty directly from my own experience, from the churches that were everywhere to the exciting and welcoming gay subculture that helps Tolan know that he's not alone. Another location in my novel that's based on somewhere real is the Melody Motel. As you can see, it's getting bombed in this drawing. The Melody plays an explosive role in Tolan's life, and I mean that metaphorically as well as literally, because it's not just a motel's bricks and mortar getting blown apart in Stuck Rubber Baby. It's everything that's log-jammed and hidebound in a Southern boy's psyche.
I think a good cartoon is one that makes people react. It can make them angry, it can make them laugh. The worst cartoon is one that you just turn the page.
Right now we're on Broadway, where in the past few years you've seen some remarkable plays about the lives of gay men. Angels in America, Love, Valor, Compassion, and the newest hit with the leading gay character, Victor Victoria. All have won critical acclaim and drawn thousands of people to their stages. But if you're looking for plays about lesbian life, you won't find a single one here today. And that's nothing unusual. One of the only plays in the history of Broadway to feature a lesbian character was Lillian Hellman's The Children's Hour.
The play was written in 1934, and while it did have a lesbian lead, her life was tragic and ended in suicide, a common fate for many fictionalized gay characters.
But perhaps even more tragic is that today, over 60 years later, the Broadway scene is still basically devoid of lesbian images. And In the Life asked, why?
Women make less money than men. 2 women in a couple are going to have less money to spend on entertainment than men are.
Resources, and it always comes down to money, are still fairly unavailable to lesbian plays in terms of development and marketing.
I mean, Tony Kushner is a gay man. He has different access to the mainstream than a lesbian would.
There's a history of gay male plays, first of all. There's a tradition.
And the fact of the matter is, there has been a homosexual network that has existed in the American theater since God knows when. There wasn't certain plays that were in place, so once again, once those plays started to appear, there was a system that could move them along.
Certainly people who wonder why isn't there a lesbian play on Broadway when Angels in America is on Broadway Also have to ask, well, why is there only one play by a woman of any sexuality on Broadway?
While lack of money, resources, and highbrow connections can make landing a spot on Broadway exceedingly difficult, there is a group of women striving to make it a reality. Their group is called the Lesbian Exchange of New Drama, or LEND.
Well, we started LEND about 2.5 years ago to support lesbian theater, lesbian plays and playwrights, try and get more production, and try and have institutional development for lesbian plays. One of the programs that we have is a monthly reading series. The last Monday of every month we have a reading series. And that's one way that, you know, just anybody can come and sort of see the work that's being done. And increasingly producers have been coming and looking at the work, and then relationships start between the director, the playwright, and a producer who might be interested.
You're supposed to be scared when you come out, not 30 years later.
I'm a late bloomer.
I think lesbian theater needs to sort of move more into the mainstream, and it's doing that organically anyway, because, you know, lesbian theater has been underrepresented, and so what LEND really tries to do is just network and create the relationships that'll continue to help that happen. You know, because theater, particularly in New York, is still about relationships and access.
Most would agree that the work that LEND does is crucial for lesbians to be able to enter the world of mainstream theater. Others would say, however, that some of the most original, surprising, and challenging theater is happening far away from the bright lights of Broadway.
I don't necessarily consider being on Broadway to be a great achievement in terms of, it's not, I find the most interesting work is downtown. There's a whole tradition of downtown theater. Downtown theater started as an alternative to mainstream or uptown theater. It started as a theater with experimental roots, where people wanted to take risks, where people wanted to tell the truth. So certainly lesbian theater is very at home in its downtown roots.
Downtown, for the most part, is the only place where lesbian theater is born and continues to thrive. And for many downtowners, going mainstream is not a goal at all.
My goal is not mainstream theater. My aesthetic thrives under real life conditions, not what you have to do in order to lose your power in order to become mainstream.
Peggy Shaw is one of the founders of a theater space called the Wow Cafe. And like most downtown theaters, it doesn't have a billboard, just a buzzer. And a key. So, if you can find it, you'll discover a vibrant scene that has been going on here for 15 years, that is sometimes radical, sometimes theatrical, and sometimes just plain social.
Met my girlfriend at Wow, met my girlfriend at Wow, and then it fell apart.
Wow is an all-volunteer theater company where, over the years, hundreds of women, performance artists, writers, and musicians have developed their work. We spoke to some of the founders of this pioneering women's performance space about what inspired WOW's creation.
It was out of desire for a place to perform that was safe and exciting and lesbian and feminist and women or anything, as long as we had control.
Instead of, like, you know, having softball or playing pool or some of the other, or, you know, political action being the center of the lesbian social activity, it was making theater, and there was an idea that everybody had a story to tell, everybody wanted to wear a wig.
Bonnie's getting married today!
I think WOW has contributed greatly to the development of lesbian theater and lesbian theater art, simply because it provided a space where there would be an audience, where you would be understood.
Ay, Dios mío, I have found my people.
Does she look like me? What? That was a joke. I feel perfectly fine, except I think I'll throw up.
Having an audience that understands and can relate to lesbian issues is a very important aspect of WOW. But even more crucial to many playwrights, like Ira Jeffries, is having a space to showcase their work.
And it allowed me to put on my productions, and that is very important to me because it's nothing if you can't produce, you can't put on your production if you've got a bunch of plays and then you can't get them produced.
She was saying that I was one of them funny women's, you know.
That is very important to me to get my plays on, and that's what WOW allows me to do, has allowed me to do, and it's still allowing me to do.
A company that also got their start at WOW is the Five Lesbian Brothers.
WOW is also a place where it's not product-based. It's not like we're in a position of writing a show and trying to get someone to produce it. We could work over a period of years together, and the first show we did, Voyage to Lesbos, we did it twice in 2 different versions, and that's very rare to find a place where you can do that. And that's how we really developed our method of working, our identity as a company.
The Five Lesbian Brothers, who now perform all over the country, recently won an Obie for an off-Broadway production they first developed at WOW, called The Secretaries.
I'm going to the water cooler. Does anybody want anything?
It's ironic that while WOW's aim may not have been to produce mainstream theater, some of their artists, like the Five Lesbian Brothers, are beginning to succeed on major stages.
And although Lend has yet to claim any major victories in commercial theater, they are making headway. And with their continued commitment to lesbian visibility on a broad scale, there will come a time when theater lovers everywhere have choices. Uptown, downtown, and maybe even your town. The holiday season is typically a time for coming together and sharing tradition. And for many, one of the most cherished of these is decorating the Yuletide tree. These ornaments, created by designer Christopher Radko, are more than just glass hand-blown in the old world tradition. The sale of these special ornaments, Frosty Cares and On the Wings of Hope, helped raise close to $200,000 for AIDS research nationwide. For Christopher Radko, the season is a time for remembering the ongoing battle against AIDS, as well as a chance to go home for the holidays. But going home isn't always such a positive experience, and many gays and lesbians have had to expand their definition of family and what it means to come home.
Yes, I think the holiday times is one of the most difficult times for gays and lesbians.
What I do for the holidays, it depends whether or not we're going to be spending the holidays with my gay-positive aunt. And when we are, then I feel great about going, and I don't feel like I'm denying myself or who I am in any way. I feel welcome.
I'm allergic to dead trees, so, you know, when you chop a Christmas tree off and stick it on a piece of wood and put it in somebody's house, I get deathly ill. So, I don't know, maybe that's sort of some sort of psychological reaction, but the last time I had Christmas at home, I took like this sinus pill that was incredibly speedy, and then the morning of Christmas and hurled the tree off of a balcony into the front yard because I felt it was making me ill.
You always feel the loss in either way. When you're with your family, you think about how great it would be to be with your friends and be completely comfortable, and when you can't spend it with your family, you feel a certain sense of the loss of that. So it's always a hard time. I mean, I think the best thing to do is see a movie.
I've done different things for the holidays, and I've gone home to my family of origin because even though I'm not a Christian and we don't celebrate Christmas, it's a time when people have time off and we can all get together. I've gone to Kate's, my lover's family. They are Christian, they do the whole thing, and I go and I'm part of that family tradition of celebrating and mostly of eating a lot.
I spend it with my family of origin and with my family of choice. I guess that's the way you define it. Mostly with my daughter, who's 10. I start celebrating about 8 months ahead of time, saving up for all the electronic games that she will want and taking out a second mortgage on the home. That's very high on my agenda, so I can make her happy. That is my goal in life, to provide enough games to keep her busy for 15 minutes. Then I will be happy. What I get is irrelevant, what my wife gets is irrelevant, what my stepchildren get, parents, nobody cares. But if I come up with the wrong game, I'm dust.
I'm really excited about these holidays. I love the holidays anyway, but this year I'm getting engaged.
To me.
And my mum is coming from Australia to help us celebrate. It means a lot to me because in the beginning my mum was really opposed to my being a lesbian, and she gave me an awful time. And now she'll be giving the toast at the engagement party, and she'll be there at Christmas time, and that she's come round and that she accepts us and that she's happy to have Anne as part of the family is just the best Christmas gift that we could get, I think.
Right.
So.
We close this edition of In the Life with composer Jim Jacobson's Overture from Winter Moon, the first ever holiday compilation of lesbian and gay singers and songwriters. From all of us at In the Life, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
In the Life is funded in part by the H. Van Ameringen Foundation. Additional support provided by James C. Hormel, Jeffrey B. Soref, and In the Life's National Membership Network.